our minds and our actions so that what we do is pleasing to you. We give you thanks in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
All right, we are in Genesis. We're going to be in chapter 22 and probably get through 23. We're actually down to verse 20. So who was not here last time? All right, so you all missed one of the, I will call one of the most important sections in Genesis in order to understand what faith looks like. So real quick review. What happens in chapter 22 in the first 19 verses is we see Abraham following God's instruction on going out to kill his son, Isaac. The key points to that are God tells him to sacrifice his son and calls him his only son, which means he's basically telling him, even though you had Ishmael, Ishmael was not part of my plan, not part of the promise. I don't consider Ishmael the son that the promise is going to come through. So if Isaac dies, that's the end of the promise. Abraham, without question, obeys God immediately. Takes his son and takes 2 young men with him. But he says something very important when they get to the place where the sacrifice is to take place. Now what he tells his son is, we're going to give a burnt offering. So he didn't lie to his son. But his son is expecting that they're going to get some animal when they get there. And what he tells the 2 young men that went with him, he said, you wait here, me and the lad will go up there to the mountain, and we're going to commit the sacrifice up there. You wait here, and then he says, we will be back. He says, we. Now his intentions are to go up and kill Isaac, like he's been told. But he says, we will be back. The reason he says that is because his faith tells him, even if he kills Isaac, God has to do something. Doesn't know what. He's going to follow what God says, even though it looks crazy. I mean, that's the best way to put it, right? It just seems crazy. So the lesson that we learn from that is a simple one, because we know that when he gets there and he goes to kill him, the angel of the Lord, which would be Christ, stops him, and there's a ram in the bush, in the thicket, and he tells him, no, you don't have to kill him. And basically, it was a test for Abraham's faith. It was God showing Abraham where his faith was, but he was also showing us an example of what faith looks like, right? So what we need to take from that, what we need to understand is that when God says something, especially the stuff he says in his word, it may seem crazy by modern standards, but you do it anyway because he said so. Does that make sense? It's the same thing that you have if you have kids. You will tell them to do something because you know something they don't know. Now they think you're crazy, right? I don't care. When they start talking, one of their favorite questions is, why? Right? Why? And as some of you know, you say, because I said so. And the reason you say that is, even if I explained it to you, you wouldn't understand. So we all understand God deals with us like that, don't we? He says do things we think are crazy. Somebody tell me something God says do that most people think is crazy.
Episode where he's gonna use them.
Just in general. Can't nobody think of anything that God says do that people find to be crazy.
Forgiveness.
Turn the other cheek.
Forgiveness. Turn the other cheek.
Love you.
Love your enemies.
Submit.
Bless those that curse you. Submit wives to husbands. Is that what you're talking about? Submit in general. Submit in general. Those are the, I'm gonna give you one. That society has convinced everybody is the craziest thing in the world to do. Remain a virgin till you get married.
Oh.
Think about it.
That's crazy.
You know why most of us don't think that? Because we think it's normal. It's an okay thing. Even when you hear it in the Bible, you kind of brush it off. Why?
So do you think it's back then versus now that it was easy to do that back then versus because of society?
I think knowledge was easy to do that.
Knowledge?
I think knowledge, because that wasn't talking about.
It's not really taught in many homes. However, this is the funny part. It's not taught, but it's known.
Yeah.
It's known. I mean, it's one of those things where you can ask any teenager, are you supposed to have sex before marriage? And almost to a person, you know what they're gonna say? Well, no, but everybody does it.
Like, that was not anything that we talked about at all. That wasn't something like, when, in our household, like in the Bible Belt, yes, we talked about it. And because we're in church, we talk about it with our kids, but no, we didn't talk about not having sex before marriage.
We didn't talk about it, but it was kind of a known entity when I was growing up. I mean, it was, yeah, well, it could be. But I mean, I had, you know, part of my family comes from California, and it was a kind of a known. Here, put it this way. How many teenagers sneak
Sneak.
and have sex?
Oh, I know.
They sneak. I mean, not many of them go announce to mom and daddy, hey, you know, no, I don't know of many girls that go to mom and dad and say, hey, you know, I'm going to the movies with Jeff tomorrow, and after the movie, we're going No, seriously, don't teenagers tell them, well, we're going to the movies, right? And parents will say, okay, what else are you doing? We may get something to eat afterwards. That gives me the time to go do whatever else I want to do. But most kids, what I'm saying is, like you say, you didn't really, but
It
you,
was expected, I didn't know.
I didn't expect it.
Yeah, that was expected, you ain't coming home.
y'all are different. Because most, hey, it could be.
That's what I'm saying, if you're raised in a Christian home, it's different.
If you're not raised in a Christian home, it's like, my parents said, oh, you can do it, just be smart about it. That's what they said, because they didn't know the bondage that was behind it.
I knew atheists. I went to school here in the Bible Belt in Greenville, Texas, with some atheists. I graduated with some, couple. And their folks weren't from Greenville, and that may have been it. But even they, because I remember distinctly having a conversation with a guy by the name of Jason, and he had a girlfriend and they were doing things, and he was like, yeah, we almost got caught by his dad. We almost got caught. My dad would have killed him.
In his house.
I don't know.
But I'm just saying, like, if it's not a Christian household, and I think, or like in a place of the Bible Belt, you just don't talk about it because it's just something that happens. And we didn't talk about waiting till you're married to get to have sex. We talk about it with our kids because we read the Bible, but we didn't talk about that.
But it's in all of the songs, it's in all of the advertisements, it's everywhere. It's everywhere.
See,
As far as waiting till you get married?
No.
It's you know, and I came up before Magic Johnson, so yes, I came up in that era before Magic, and so I came, you know, I was a young kid in the 70s and a teenager in the 80s. So I came out of a decade of free love. However, it was still, and I was raised in a Christian home. So it was still understood in my Christian home that you don't have sex outside of marriage, but we blew it off. We literally blew it off. It was common practice to be devious about something that everybody knew was going on. So much so that I think most parents even denied the fact that it was their child. So, what I'm getting at is, that is a, for a lot of people, it's crazy. So some of y'all have heard me talk about a young lady I grew up with. I call her my cousin, and Stacy wouldn't mind me telling anyone this. We grew up together in Greenville, Texas. We went to church together. She was just like family to me. And God's had a real problem with Stacy. Stacy was beautiful, but Stacy was not putting out. And that had a problem with that. Stacy went off to school. She went to Rice. She went to Columbia. She became a vice president. She is a millionaire. I talked to Stacy when we were in our 40s. We're the same age. And she had never been married. And she was telling me, this is the most difficult thing in the world. I said, what is that? She said, I'm a 43-year-old virgin. And this just seems crazy. And I'm wondering what God is doing. 43 years old. And I said, well, you know, you haven't got married. I said, you're doing the right thing. And she was like, it doesn't feel like it. I feel like I don't know what God is doing here, what God is trying to prove. And she said she could never keep a man because of that very thing. And it was funny, 2 years after that, she got married to a great guy, a Christian, and they have a wonderful life. But she waited. She actually waited. And now she would tell you it was worth the wait. She was glad she did. She was glad she was obedient. So, now, I don't want anyone here to feel bad because I don't know, but I'm just imagining that most of us didn't wait. And my point is, God will tell us to do things that society will tell us is absolutely totally crazy, and this is the norm, and run with the norm. But you have to be like Abraham and go, as crazy as it sounds, I'm going to do what you say. As crazy as it sounds, I'll do what you say. And this is what I was talking about when it comes to your faith. This is where God says, prove me now. That's what he means by this. He's saying, be obedient, do what I say, and see how it comes out. It's not going to be easy.
But I think God does things to build up your faith as well. He proves himself to you before he even asks you to do something crazy. Because at this point, you know he's God. And what he says, it is so. So he can tell you to do anything at that point, and you can do it. I think that's how Abraham got to that
Yes.
point as well.
Did he not build his faith up?
Yeah. That's
Oh,
what I'm
it's
saying. He built his
65
faith.
years.
Yeah.
From the time that he gets
Right.
there, from the time that he has the promise
Right.
of Isaac, all the way up to that sacrifice, that's 65 years.
65 years. And by the way, so think about it. He promised him a child. He didn't get the child till 65 years later. In between all of that, remember the trip down into Egypt? Right? We say his faith went crazy. What did God do? Blessed him, got him out of it. Right? And then he had another trip into where with Abimelech. Same thing. In between that, there was Hagar. So in each and every case, God proved himself to Abraham. Right? And so when Abraham gets here, it's as if Abraham has said, now, God made him a promise. Abraham's faith was really weak in that promise. But God delivered anyway. If the promise had been dependent upon Abraham's faith, he never would have got it. I always tell people this. If God says something, he's not depending on your faith to do what he wants to do. He's going to do what he says because he said it. That was the whole idea of that covenant that was unilateral, where God said, I'm going to do this regardless of what you do. And then he proved that because Abraham did everything to make God so mad that God would have, if it had been one of us, we'd have been like, dude, you don't trust me, do you? You know how do we do when we don't think somebody trusts us? We kick him to the curb. And he didn't. So when he does give him Isaac, now that he's got Isaac, he says, go kill him. And Abraham says, as crazy as that sounds, hey, you've never let me down. You always deliver what you say. And until we come to that conclusion with God, our faith will never be like that of Abraham's. We literally have to say, okay. So, does that mean you believe hard? Or do you make a choice to do whatever God says?
Just make a choice to do whatever you say.
Yes, that's the other thing about faith, because I know sometimes people think, I'm just going to believe hard. No, you don't believe hard, you just make the choice. By the way, can you make a choice and have doubt?
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's okay. You can make a choice and have doubt. You just do what you're told because you trust. That's the part of faith that I don't think people understand. It's a trust factor. I trust you. I don't understand it. Because I don't understand it, I may have some doubts intellectually. Makes no sense. Don't know how it's going to work. Don't know how this is going to happen. But I trust you, so I will do it. Has anyone ever trusted somebody and they led you wrong?
Mm-hmm.
Right? But the reason you did what they said is because you trusted them. All right? So when you trust God, these are the types of things that will happen. God will blow your mind when you trust him. I think a lot of us don't experience God because we have a lack of trust. Because he likes us to experience him. Think about it. Hebrews 11:6 says, without faith, it's impossible to please him. Right? It's impossible to please him. If I'm not pleasing him, I'm not going to experience him like I should. Right? So, again, crazy stuff. Things that don't seem to make sense. Trust him. Some vocabulary that you should never use is what I just used when it comes to God. Never say never when it comes to God. You're in a situation and you say, it'll never be fixed. Wrong. When it comes to God, it can be. It can always be fixed.
Amen.
Right? It can always be fixed, but are you going to surrender yourself to God and let God be God and do what God is going to do? That's the choice that you make. That's where you have to have that choice. He does not do things like we want him to. He does things perfectly. There's a difference. Right? Tell me I'm going to have a child and you're going to make a great nation out of me and it takes 65 years? 25 years, 65 years at this point. But I'm crazy for following that. I'm already too old. And you're going to tell me, and then I got to wait another 25 years? Who in here would work with a promise? And what if God told you in 25 years?
Well, I have faith I still be here that long.
But see, that's the thing.
That's why he doesn't tell us 25 years. That's why he just says, I'm going to do this. And you're like, okay.
But even without the timeline, think about Abraham. You're going to have a child. Not going to tell you when. But as soon as things went funny for Abraham, he lost all faith in everything. As soon as things went funny. So you got to understand that when we look at Abraham, this is where we see the father of faith in action. God will test you. Is God going to tell you to kill your child? No. There was a cultural significance to killing a child back then with the pagans. It wasn't unheard of for sacrificing a child. Not that God forbid his people from doing that, but for Abraham's own intellect, that wasn't the craziest thing he'd ever heard. Now, God, you didn't find anybody that says, well, God done told me to go kill my child like he did Abraham. They're crazy. No, God's not telling you to do that. All right, so we get to this section in verse 20 that at first glance, you're going to go, why is this even here? We just came off of this really in-depth look at what faith looks like, And now we get this in verses 20 through 24. When we get to the end of this, I'm going to tell you why I believe it's in here and how it works with faith. All right. Now, right there? Now it came to pass after these things that it was told to Abraham, saying, so somebody told him this, we don't know who. Indeed, Milcah also has borne children to your brother Nahor. It's out of nowhere. Now Nahor is back in the land of Ur. Huz, his firstborn, Buz, his brother. Huz and Buz. Sound like a limerick. Huz and Buz. Kemuel, the father of Aram, Chest, Hazo, Pildash, Jiphlath, and Bethuel. Now these are his nephews. And Bethuel begat Rebekah. Circle Rebekah. That's important. These 8 Milcah bore to Nahor, Abram's brother. All right. So Abram gets information that his brother is having kids right and left. How many kids does he have? One. His brother has a bunch of kids. And we get this thing here that Bethuel begat Rebekah. I told you to circle that. All right. All right. And his concubine, so we get here to verse 24. His brother had concubine. Did Abraham have a concubine? Huh? He had one. We know, at least one we know of. Yeah, he had to send her away. Whose name was Reemah, also bore Taba, Gaham, Thahash, and Maacah. So now, for Abraham, what he's got here is, my brother has a bunch of kids, but the information that's given to him, there is one girl thrown in this. Who is that? Rebekah. Who's Rebekah? Isaac's wife. I believe that the reason this is thrown here is because later on when we get to chapter 24, Abraham feels he's going to die and he's going to send out his servant to go find a wife for his son Isaac, and he's going to specifically tell him, go to my people. How would he know that amongst his people he could have a wife found? I believe that information came here. Because Abraham is going to send out his servant by faith. Because he's going to say, I don't want him intermarrying with these Canaanites. All right. So I believe that this section is here just to show that Abraham had information that his brother had children, and specifically that he had a niece or a great niece by the name of Rebekah. All right. And Rebekah would be the mother of Jacob and Esau. All right. So chapter 23, we're going to deal with the death of Sarah and really begin to understand a little something about death and about how you and I can play, or not how we can, but how we do play small parts in God's bigger plans. We'll get to that. So Sarah lived 127 years. Now, here's the deal. She is the only woman who gets this. The number of years she lived and her death. She's the only one. If you remember, when we were doing all those, looking at all those lineage, it was always males, right? And we knew how long they lived. We never heard anything about any women. But Sarah gets this. So this designation is important. She lived 127 years. These were the years of the life of Sarah. So Sarah died in Kirjath Arba. That's Hebron now. All right? In the land of Canaan. And Abraham came to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. Now, when Abraham comes to mourn for her and weep for her, what do you think? Why is he mourning and weeping? She gone? Why is he mourning and weeping? Because she's gone. Sarah's gone.
I mean, she was one of the only people who saw the whole promise with him.
Okay. Y'all are talking about the life they lived. Right? Here's the thing. Does he mourn and weep because he'll never see Sarah again?
No. I don't think so, cause he know that he will see her again.
No, how
Think
long
about that.
Ah.
Oh, wait, no. Jesus
I
ain't
don't
dead
think, I
yet.
don't think he knows that. I think that's why he's mourning and weeping.
Y'all, I like y'all.
Turn over to,
Terrible.
I thought you were gonna tell us to turn
Yeah,
to.
turn to where we
We'll get there. We always let the Bible help us out. But no, all right, so when someone dies, right, we mourn and we weep. Agreed? All right. Should there be a difference between Christians and the world in
Yes.
mourning and weeping?
Yes.
What's the difference?
Yes, we know we're gonna see that person again.
Okay.
And we know that life doesn't end, that it just continues on.
Okay, so let's turn to Hebrews. And I think it's the 11th chapter. This is what y'all waiting for me, right? Y'all was like, you gonna turn to look? Okay, Hebrews 11. Let's get it. Hebrews 11. All right. Everybody find verse 8. Hebrews 11 and verse 8. Now this is, these are examples of faith. All right, everybody there?
Amen.
All right. By faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to the place which he would receive as an inheritance, and he went out, not knowing where he was going. By faith, he dwelt in the land of promise as in a foreign country. We're going to see this in a minute, too, when we go back to Genesis. As in a foreign country. So he's going to a place that he's going to inherit, but it's a foreign country. Dwelling in tents with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs with him of the same promise. For he waited for the city which has foundations, whose builder and maker is God. Y'all see verse 10? Let me read that again. For he waited for the city which has foundations, whose builder and maker is God. Yes. The builder and maker of this city is not on earth. So Abraham was not waiting for the promised land. Y'all get that? God told him that you're going to get the promised land, but Abraham never, ever possessed it.
No.
In fact, we're going to see him buy a piece of it in a minute. So if you look at verse 10, what was he waiting on?
The foundation.
Setting the foundations and architecture of God.
What would you call that? I mean, somebody said use the word. I like
I
it.
think that's heaven.
Heaven. He's waiting on the hereafter. If he's waiting on the hereafter, that means he expects to what? Be there. So would he have expected Sarah to be there as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's read on. By faith, Sarah herself also received strength to conceive seed, and she bore a child when she was past the age, because she judged him faithful who had promised. Therefore, from one man, and him as good as dead, were born as many as the stars of the sky, and multitude and numberless as the sand which is by the seashore. These all died in faith, not having received the promises.
The promise.
Promises. These all died in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them afar off, were assured of them, embraced them, and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. If they're strangers and pilgrims on the earth, then would they have ever expected that this would be the end of it?
No.
No.
Because they saw their promises where? Afar off. Now, look at verse 14. For those who say such things declare plainly that they seek a homeland. Or your Bible may say country. But if it's not here on the earth, where is it?
Heaven.
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 So when he goes to mourn, he is not mourning because she's gone and I ain't never gonna see her again. He's mourning the same way. I always like to put it this way. Who has had this experience? Some of y'all aren't old enough. Maybe I flipped it. Maybe. Who in here has it? Oh, you two have. You've had children go off to college.
I have.
Oh, I forgot about yours. I'm sorry.
I have. Got one graduating this year.
Yeah,
Step.
that's right, Fred.
Step.
Still the door.
Stop. Not the same. You
You
two,
right.
and
Same
this
thing.
one,
This one.
and that one up there. All right. When your child went off, how'd you feel?
Relieved.
No. I
See,
cried.
that's why I said step. How did you feel? Yeah. You're excited, but you're
But
I was
you
excited.
sad. You sad. When I went off to college, one of the worst days of my life
your grandfather.
was the day I had to leave and look at my grandfather sitting on the porch, and I knew I was leaving. That was hard. And he was sitting up there on the porch with tears in his eyes. But it was a happy event. I was going off to college. When someone goes away as a Christian, they're going off to heaven. Isn't that exciting?
Yeah.
That should be an exciting event. But yet, it's natural to mourn
Yeah, you're
missing them. You're going to miss them. You're mourning missing them. You know what you're not mourning? They're gone for good.
Yeah.
You're not mourning, they're gone for good. Turn to 1 Thessalonians. Find chapter 2. Somebody tell me what the first word is in chapter 2.
What book?
Give me the first verse.
Yourselves
I said the first word, didn't I?
Yeah.
Give me the verse.
know,
Paul's
brethren.
ministry to the Thessalonica.
What did you say?
I'll remember.
I said chapter 2. Give me the first.
It's for you
No, brothers
yourselves
and
know, brethren, that our coming to you was not in vain.
Keep reading.
But even our coming to you, wait a minute, but even after we had suffered before, we spitefully treated at Philippi. As you know, we were bold in our God, in our God to speak to you the gospel.
Go to chapter 4.
Chapter 4.
Yeah.
Living to please God. Is that what you want?
No, I'm looking for the word ignorant.
And then brother,
Believers would die?
Yeah.
That one?
Is that chapter 4?
Yeah, 13, brothers and sisters, we do not want you to be uninformed about those who sleep in death.
Yes. I like ignorant.
Oh.
Oh, but I would not have you be
Ignorant,
ignorant, brother,
brethren. Okay.
concerning them which
Yeah.
are asleep.
So that you do not grieve like the rest of mankind who have no hope, for we believe that Jesus
Ah.
died and rose again.
Stop right there. You would not grieve like the rest of mankind that have no hope. There's a difference in grievance when you understand, when your faith is like that of Abraham's, where you understand that right here, right now, this is not home.
Thank you, Jesus.
That when someone dies and leaves here, they're not leaving home. They're going home, and you will be going home too. You see the difference? I miss them, but I have hope.
If they're saved.
Well, my hope is that I will see them again, right?
If they're
So if they're saved, but the point is, if I believe someone is saved and they leave here, then I'm going to see them again. Some people grieve because they're never going to see them again. Christians have hope.
But what about for the ones that you don't know if they were saved or not?
Well, there's a couple of things there. One, you ought to be grieving because of that very fact. Two, you ought to be grieving for yourself if you didn't do anything
Yeah, to prevent that.
to prevent that from happening, right? That's one of the things when you go to what we say, a homegoing celebration for one who's saved. But if you're at a funeral, that should be a reminder that
You can't tell
I
us.
don't want to grieve for someone because I know I'm not going to see them again.
You try everything that you possibly can.
Yes. It should motivate you. So there is a difference. All right, come on back to Genesis. So in his grieving, even though he's grieving, he's not grieving that he's not going to see her again. He's grieving because he's going to miss her. All right, he's going to miss her. And he's going to have a very healthy, what I call a healthy outlook on dying. This is something that, when we don't have a healthy outlook on it, we have a lot of anxiety. By the way, a healthy outlook isn't, let me go kill myself. A healthy outlook is, when it comes, I'm okay. That's a healthy outlook. Not that I'm trying to speed it up, right? Not that. But when it happens, it happens. All right, so chapter 23, verse number 3. Then Abraham stood up from before his dead and spoke to the sons of Heth, this is the Hittites, saying, I am a foreigner and a visitor among you. Now get that. As Aston pointed out, this is 65 years later. He got a promise that this land that he's in is going to be his, but in 65 years, he has not possessed it. He is still a stranger in the land. In fact, how in the world is he actually living where he is right now? Does anybody remember?
The
Well,
guy,
we got the tents, but
the guy that he told was
Abimelech,
his sister.
remember?
Gave
Yeah,
him
Abimelech
land.
said, hey, pick a place and go stay there. All right? That allowed him to stay in the land without any problems. He says, give me property for a burial place among you that I may bury my dead out of my sight. So now he's saying, I want to go buy some land to bury Sarah out of my sight. But wait a minute, this land is actually yours. But has he possessed it yet? No. So he's willing to purchase what God has already promised him he was going to get. Now, I told you all earlier, I said one of the things we learned in chapter 23 is that we can become a part, or we play a part, a small part, in God's bigger plan. This is an act of playing a part in this plan. All right? Because what he's saying, think about this. His faith right now, we know, is at an 11 on a scale of 1 to 10. He has total faith in God. God has promised him this land. He has not possessed this land. We go over to Hebrews and we find out, even though he hasn't possessed the land, he's looking afar off at a whole different thing. The promises that God has made, he's not going to get to necessarily see them. Right? However, he's looking at heaven, and then he knows that this land will be possessed. Right? Not by him, but by his descendants. So why not just take a piece of it? It's mine anyway. But it belongs to what? Someone else at this point in time. And as long as they own it, what he's going to do, he's like, it's mine. I'm going to buy a piece of it. So watch how this works. He tells him he's a foreigner. He wants to buy a piece of property. Verse 5, and the sons of Heth answered Abraham, saying to him, hear us, my Lord. You are a mighty prince among us. We got mad respect for you. Bury your dead in the choicest of our burial places. None of us will withhold from you his burial place, that you may bury your dead. What did they just tell him? You got it. Do whatever you want. It's yours. You got major respect from us. Obviously, you're a great man. Whatever the case may be, do whatever you want in this land. Abimelech, same kind of thing, right? Go wherever you want. Do whatever you want. Now, look at what Abraham does. Verse 7. Then Abraham stood up and bowed himself to the people of the land, the sons of Heth, and he spoke to them, saying, if it is your wish that I bury my dead out of my sight, hear me. So if you agree to what I want to do, and meet with Ephron the son of Zohar for me, that he may give me the cave of Machpelah, which he has, which is at the end of his field. Let him give it to me at the full price, as property for a burial place among you. So now he says, I've picked a spot. I know the spot I want. This guy has it. Go find him. Tell him I want to what? Buy it. I want to buy it. What do they tell him? You can go anywhere you want and take whatever you want. He says, no, I want to buy it. All right, look in verse 10. Now Ephron dwelt among the sons of Heth, and Ephron the Hittite answered Abraham in the presence of the sons of Heth, all who entered at the gate of his city, saying, where are they at? The gate. What does that mean?
Leadership.
Right. This is the public forum. This is the governmental place. This is where they transact business. So anything said here would be by law, so to speak. No, my Lord, hear me. And this is the person that owns that piece of land. First we had the government basically saying, take whatever you want. Now the person that actually owns it says this, I give you the field and the cave that is in it. I give it to you in the presence of the sons of my people. I give it to you, bury your dead. Y'all notice an exclamation point? Yeah, it's emphatic in the Hebrew language. He's literally saying, take it. I don't want it. It's yours. It's an honor for me to give it to you. That's basically what he's saying. Verse 12. Then Abraham bowed himself down before the people of the land. This is an act of begging. Now look, watch what he begs. And he spoke to Ephron in the hearing of the people in the land, saying, if you will give it, please hear me. I will give you money for the field. Take it from me, and I will bury my dead there. Abraham, it's your land anyway. They just don't know it yet. They're giving you what's already yours. Why would you pay for it? Why would you pay for it? Yes. I'm not going to take anything. Yeah, he could jump up and say, God promised me this land anyway. Or he could in his mind say, God promised me this land anyway. You know, this is Abraham, and I hate to use this word because I don't want you to take it wrong, but this is Abraham investing in God's plan. He's buying a piece of land that's going to be his anyway. He's buying a piece of land to bury the dead. By the way, not only will Sarah be buried there, he will be buried there. Isaac will be buried there. Jacob will be buried there. And then Joseph will tell his brothers, look, I'm here in Egypt. When I die, take my bones and take them back over here and bury me there with my fathers. So what Abraham is doing here, he's buying the family burial plot in a land that's actually, God has told him, is his. But yet he never possesses the land. So what Abraham is not doing is he's not getting ahead of God. We do that sometimes. He didn't get ahead of God. God told him the land, I'm going to give you the land. When God told him to get up, he said, I'm going to take you to a land and show you the land is yours. When did he ever go on the land and tell anybody, it's mine? Get out.
Get out.
He didn't. He never got ahead of God. And the reason I'm saying that is I love it when people do, I say I love it, it's funny to me, not people. When Christians go, God has told me something, and then they run and they try to just do, you know, I'm like, okay, God told you that. All right, now let's think about that for a second, because people do this kind of stuff with houses. I've heard, like I told you, I've heard the Christians marching around the house 7 times and shouting and talking about the house is mine. It's people living in it. Right. It ain't for sale. But you know, people, Christians will do that. They'll show up and tell somebody, I don't know what you think, but this is mine. God told me. I'm like, well, maybe God did, but don't get ahead of God. Let God make the way. Follow his lead. Don't take over. Right? Don't take over. When God promises you something in the Bible, don't take over. Be obedient. Follow his lead. Abraham here, it's like, Abraham, you kind of crazy. This is modern day Christian teaching to me for Abraham. Abraham, what are you talking about? The reason that they're offering you this is God is making a way for you right there. This is your land anyway. Be bold. Abraham's like, no, it ain't my land right now. God has promised me the land. But we find out in Hebrews, even though these promises were made, Abraham is looking afar off anyway. You know what Abraham is basically saying? Whatever happens down here, remember what he said in the beginning. I ain't from here anyway.
The thing is,
That's our problem.
God gave him timing because he told him his people would be enslaved for 400 years. And he knows his people haven't been enslaved yet.
He is,
You don't have people.
he doesn't have anybody. But he's,
That's
a lot of Christians would not hear that part.
But
They
that,
would only hear, I possess.
but that comes from the growth, because if he was where he is right now in his faith, then when God made him that promise about his kid and his wife offered him that other woman, he would have said no. God didn't say it that way, but he didn't have enough faith, so he.
This is the whole point. This is the point where we get to the whole faith piece.
Right.
Because if we actually have faith in God, we step back and we say, you said it, therefore you will work it out. Right? What we tend to do is we want to get ahead of God. That's what Sarah was doing.
Yep, trying to fulfill.
Trying to, well, if you said it, I guess I need to fix it up for you. Anytime we get ahead of God, we're going to do something that shouldn't be done, right? And, the funny thing with faith is where we get into things where I like to say, when we have the promises of the word, right? And then we have those things, and this is where it gets what I like to call dicey, but I'm going to tell you how to work this out with faith. All right. So people start saying things like, I believe, or I know, or God has told me I'm going to do A, B, and C. Y'all heard that, right?
Yeah.
Right? I believe, I know, God has told me I'm going to do A, B, and C. I can't go in the Bible and find a scripture that says you're going to do A, B, and C. However, here's what I can find in the Bible. In the book of James. Don't say we're going to do this or that without saying, lest the Lord says so. So if you believe that and you believe the Lord has said so, work towards it and it will work out. But here's your faith. Instead of, because what's hard for us is it something I just wanted? Was it something God really told me? Because sometimes we want things so bad that we think God has told us. In our own minds, we figured it that way because it's just gotta be that way. It's just, Lord, I just know this is what you want me to do. It's gotta be for me. It's mine. It just is. Okay, well here's my thing. Trust him then.
Yes.
And this is how you trust him. You say God told you that, work towards it. What you gonna do if it don't happen?
Be okay.
Well, it's like
You
Shadrach,
should be
Meshach, and
okay.
Abednego. They were like, hey, he can save us, but if he does, he does. If
That's-
he don't, he still is God.
That's the thing. Most of what people are saying when they say that, they would be better off if they it said what Meshach, and Abednego did. What they were doing was they were like, think about them. Y'all know the two we're talking about, the 3 Hebrew boys, the fiery furnace, Book of Daniel, all that stuff. What's beautiful about that wonderful story is they were actually obeying God, and it had nothing to do with the fiery furnace. It had nothing to do with that. This was that crazy faith thing. If you don't do this, which goes against what God says, we're going to burn you up. Their answer is, well, burn us. Not that you can't burn me. See, Christians would have said something like, a lot of Christians today would have said, oh, you can't burn me. The Lord ain't going to let you burn me because I'm obedient to him, therefore I'm not going to suffer anything. What they said was, you can throw us in there and we know he's able. He's able. You know what they were literally saying? If he wants to, he'll do it. If not, we are willing to burn for our obedience. Most of us don't like to function that way. Who wants to say, I'm willing to suffer for my obedience? What we like to do is say, if I'm obedient, ain't gonna be no suffering.
Well, I just just remember how many people came up to me and God told me, you're my wife. I'm like, he told me that.
He told me that.
So it's like, you should have kept that until you had confirmation.
That's a norm. And again, to me, I say that's a norm. That's one of the funniest things that I think that I see in Christianity that is just hilarious to me. Because usually the person that says that is and I'm gonna say, usually the guy that says that has told that to 3 or 4 women.
The same day.
You know, that's standard. Oh, you're a Christian? The Lord told me. He told me. And but again, that's one of those. And
Did you get confirmation?
If you're single and a guy tells a woman that, my answer, if I was a woman, my answer to that would be, okay, well, I tell you what, if that's the way it's supposed to be, I guess it'll be that way.
I guess so.
But he hadn't said nothing to me yet. Right? It's funny God told you, but he didn't tell me.
What's her name that had the baby? Mary?
Yeah.
Like, he did come and confirm Mary, let her know she was having a baby.
Right.
But she treasured those things in her heart.
Right.
That, I look to Mary as a really good example of when God gives you a word, and it's crazy. You treasure it in your heart,
Yep.
you wait on
You
confirmation.
wait on the confirmation, that's it.
But that's the hardest point, where God has told you something, and you're waiting, and you're just like,
So
You got no
if y'all aren't catching this is what I was trying to say earlier about wait on God, don't get ahead of God. If you feel like God has led you to something, the last thing you need to do is go publish that.
Amen.
That's the last thing you need to do. Because the first thing that's gonna happen is, now you've given, like my grandmother used to say, I would say this, old folks used to say, the devil don't know what you're talking about when you hum and all that kind of stuff, and you don't say this, that, and that. No, there's sometimes that you don't need to publish what you feel God has told you. I would say keep a lot of that, treasure it, because as soon as you tell it, the very first thing that's going to happen is the enemy is going to attack it.
oh yeah.
That's the very first thing. So you're gonna have people, and they're gonna attack you in 2 ways. A, they're gonna try to dissuade you from it, and then B, they're gonna try to get you to get ahead of the Lord on it. Oh, the Lord told you that. Well, it's time for you to step on out on faith then. Let's go do, hold on.
So do the devil not, if the Lord tell you to do something, if you don't say, the devil doesn't hear it?
To me, it's kind of funny. But I understand the implication behind it.
Yeah,
Because
I know.
as soon as, first of all, even amongst Christians, you got Christians that might be jealous. God spoke to you, I'm gonna prove to you he did. You say, well, why would my brother or sister want to do me like that? Because your own brothers and sisters will do you like that. I mean, seriously, your own brothers and sisters would, look at Joseph. He had a dream and made the mistake of telling his brothers.
Yeah.
Next thing, they selling him into slavery. We get rid of you. We gonna bow down to you. You done lost your mind.
Jesus' siblings thought he was crazy.
Yes, they didn't believe in him until after his resurrection. So, yeah, you're going to have that when you feel like God is leading you in a direction. Okay, cool. Let him lead. And again, if it doesn't happen, you're putting your trust in him, not in what you think, but in him. Because if he has declared it, it will happen. If it doesn't, you know what you can say? I misunderstood. And that's okay. Because it gets you where it needs to get you. Sometimes it's good to find out I misunderstood. Because for most of us, as Rev said before, when we hear from God, we hear in our own voice.
Yeah.
You had a question?
No, it's
Oh.
I was just.
Yes, ma'am.
I don't know how to word it, but how do you balance that? Because for me, I feel like I went after a lot of stuff that was just me, and I don't hear from God the same way Tanya does. So I work hard at what He has already given me, but it is a struggle for me to go after what I want because I don't.
So I got a question.
That is what He wants.
I got a question for you though. Have you achieved anything?
Yeah.
Okay. Watch what I'm about to say because
But it wasn't what I went
this is
after on my own.
wait, listen what I'm about to tell you. All right. Watch what I'm about to tell you. Is God all knowing?
Yes.
Is he all powerful? You achieved something. It wasn't what you wanted, but you achieved something, right? It seems like the position you have now is very fulfilling, even with your job. I'm just talking about with your job. Was it something you thought you'd be doing a year ago, 2 years ago?
It's actually the job that I always wanted. I mean, since I graduated
Why?
from college. Huh?
Why? Watch
Just-
this. Why? Why did you want that kind of job?
When I went to school, I wanted to be doing employee relations.
Why?
It was fulfilling to me. Somebody helped me at work in Navolia.
Okay.
When I talked to Navolia at work, she just kind of blew me away, and I liked what she did and the way that she was able to touch people and what she
So
did.
you're compassionate about what you do now.
Yes.
You don't know that might have been God speaking to you. I think this is where we get messed up with this whole thought process. I think when y'all hear somebody say God spoke to me, sometimes we're thinking that this person was walking down the street and had an Abraham moment where they looked afar off and somebody was walking up to him and said, "Hey, Kevin," and I said, "Here I am." Wrong. God speaks to you through other people. God speaks to you through his word. God speaks to you through dreams and still small voices, all of these things. But here's how you know it's God speaking. You may not know until after it happens. Then you'll realize God was speaking to me. The reason I kept saying, why, what I'm telling you is that probably, because he's all-knowing, was God speaking to you and telling you through whatever the circumstances were, this is where your passion lies, this is where you need to be. You wouldn't realize it until maybe later on. And for some people, it's when you start thanking him for it and you start to realize, man, this is where God wanted me to be.
I
This is
did
for
realize,
God.
I will say that I realized every step of the way because I sat for a long time just doing what I was supposed to do. And I spoke up when I went into meetings. I told them what I desired, but if they didn't listen, I didn't enforce the issue. But then it just started changing, and even, like I said, financially, I could cry. But as far as my job, each time, it just got, I would go back to other departments and be like, whoa, Jesus, I could be sitting here like them. I mean, they literally are staring at each other in their face. They don't have full cubicles anymore. Their desks are literally like these chairs are set up. And I mean, just to, when I listen to them talk about how their work is, I have more freedom at work. I have more, not flexibility in my schedule, but flexibility in what I do. I can write blogs for my department now. I interact with marketing. I mean, like that, those are the things that I've always wanted to do. Whereas before, I was just pushing papers and meeting quotas.
And this is where you say, thank you, Lord.
Yeah,
Right?
I do.
And what I'm saying is, God put a desire in your heart. He spoke to you. I promise you he did. And you don't know it until, like I said, until it happens. The issue is, though, is when someone feels like God is speaking to them before it happens, they got to be real careful about how they go about things.
So that's why I just stopped trying to figure, I just gave up.
That's called surrender. That's called surrender, and that's a good thing. Yes, ma'am.
So today, I was just compelled to study Hebrews 11, like all day. I've been studying Hebrews 11 all day. My sister called, I'm talking to her, and I'm like, we started talking about something that was so negative, and I was like, let's end this on a good note. Let me read to you. So I started reading to her Hebrews 11 until she got another call. But when Mommy and I, when we're driving, I turn on the certain slide until we get here, so I can kind of be caught up by the time I get here. And when you went to Hebrews 11, I was like, I felt like that was my confirmation that was God speaking to me today, to have me the desire to study Hebrews 11. Because I felt, it was just like confirmation once you start going to it today. And that was just, so it wasn't like I had an audible voice saying, Nicole, study Hebrews 11, and then your pastor's going to cover it today. And no, but it was confirmation once you did. Here's the funny thing, because David does that with me a lot.
if y'all know David, David's in his Bible all the time.
Yeah.
But he'll be the first one to say, I don't know why I was studying this, but
Oh,
then this happens, you know, and so even with something like that, are you supposed to be studying your Bible?
yeah.
All right. If you don't study your Bible, will you ever have any of these moments? No. God will speak to you if you obey. What I'm saying is, even with something as simple as that, if everybody in here was studying their Bible, I will guarantee you that within a 2 or 3 month period, you're going to come to me at some point and say, you know, I was looking at this and you'll be amazed. I've heard it so much till I'm almost numb to it. I expect it. When I preach a sermon, I actually expect somebody to actually say to me at some point in time, I was studying that, praying about this, confused with that. Because I've often said to the Lord, okay, Lord, what do you want me to talk about? And I always feel like God says, prove me that. In other words, while you're sitting there waiting for me to tell you, what do you want to talk about? Well, Lord, I'd like to talk about this. And it's like, go ahead. And then I get all of these confirmations that come up. And even with Bible study, sometimes I tell you all, what do y'all want to go to next? And I just trust that God will speak through you. How could he not speak if you're saying, I want to go to the Word, I just don't know where I want to go? And he says, go wherever you want to. Because I'm going to speak to you. Period. And I think what everyone needs to understand is that God is going to speak to you in your obedience. Sometimes it is just surrender. I have to use myself to say that. So, all right, full disclosure. I have been approached over these 15 years? Where are we?
15 this year.
15 years.
16 this year.
16. Over these 16 years, I've been approached about, I'm going to say 12 to 13 different times to go and pastor someplace else. I've been offered, boy, Adrian, I've been offered salaries of 6 figures to go and pastor someplace else. I do this for free. Every time I've been offered something like that, I did not feel right about it. I felt funny. I didn't feel right. I didn't feel like God was talking to me. The last time it happened, you know what I said? Oh, sure, you want to merge? Merge? Yeah, we'll just merge the churches. Merge? Yeah, just merge them. Just bring them together. Leadership from my church just merge. I literally told the guy, we'll just take them.
He didn't get the confirmation.
No, he didn't get that. So, but to me, the only reason, how am I here? I never in my life, when I was 12 years old, I was given the nickname preacher just because I went to church a lot as a kid. But when that nickname was given to me, it felt right. I was 12. Now, was I a good kid?
No.
Not at all. But I never had a problem with it. I always said I never desired, I just knew, right? So God spoke to me at some point, but I didn't have one of these moments. You know, I've heard so many preachers with moments. You know, I was sitting there, opening up the scripture, and it felt like bricks hit me. This is one of my best friends. Bricks hit me, I fell out the chair, I couldn't move for about 3 hours. What about you? I don't know, I was in seminary and it just kind of progressed from there. I can't tell you that I had a Paul-like experience. I didn't fall off my horse and a light shine around me and all of that, but I know God has spoken. How do I know? Because of where I am now. Yeah, yes, ma'am.
Well, I mean, another thing also is that I think God speaks to us even in our disobedience.
Oh, absolutely.
But the more that we read His Word, the more we know His voice. So that, because you're hearing things that are coming in from all different angles, and you have to be in His Word in order to actually know, is this God? Is this from Him?
God is speaking, absolutely. God is speaking, but so is Satan. Prince of the power of the air,
You gotta be able to filter.
right? Speaking, bunch of junk. By the way, most of it sounds godly. The devil does not speak to Christians ungodly. He speaks to you from a place that you would consider to be godly. If you're not in his word, as Aston put it, you don't have anything to check it. This is your filter, right? This is why some of you all have had this experience. You've heard other Christians, or you've heard teachings, or whatever it is, and you go, that's so unbiblical, it's ridiculous. And what you got to understand is Satan speaks through false teaching. It's one of his biggest ways to speak to Christians. If you look at the New Testament, it is really a defense of Christ and a warning about false teaching. Most of the epistles warn us about false teachers. Peter goes crazy with it. All over it. There is warning after warning after warning. Jesus says they will come in wolves in what? Sheep's clothing. Right? So God is speaking. I promise God is talking. And if you'll listen, one of the things you will come to, watch how I bring this back. One of the things you'll come to the conclusion of is that God is trying to get us to know that while you are here, you don't belong here. You just don't belong here. And you should know you don't belong. Who has allergies? See, you don't belong here.
Seems like the world, my sister and I were just talking about how the world is just getting, like,
Horrible.
it's getting really, really, really bad. And I said, and you talk to other people, and it's just like, some people are just oblivious to what's going on. And I noticed that the more the TV doesn't come on, because now my football is gone, but the more that the TV does not come on, the more that, you don't listen to the radio, the more you're filling yourself up with the things of God, the uglier, and your eyes are just open to what people are not seeing. That all this noise that is going on, and there's so much noise at this point in time, you just see it where other people around you are just totally oblivious to it.
Well,
And your heart hurts for them.
that's because if you're in the Word, it's a filter. You see things differently. If you let the world speak to you, and you don't let the Word speak to you, what ends up happening is the world will tell you that it's great. This is a wonderful place to be. This is the best time in the world to be here. We're on the verge of technology doing all kinds of wonderful things. I mean, you hear all kinds of great things. However, when you go to the Bible, what ends up happening is you take an examination of it. And I will tell anybody, if you study the Bible enough, you will realize the world is a complete and total, utter mess. Really bad.
Christian teaching, you really gotta study your Bible.
Oh,
Because they're very sneaky with it, whereas it sounds real good. It's just a few things that's off, but it be major stuff
It's very.
that be
Oh,
off.
oh, somebody else.
Very deception.
Oh,
Yeah.
bait and switch all day, Marla. So yeah, I'm like, whoa, that sounded real good. That was off, but that sounded good.
I was just talking to one of my coworkers, and he was just saying, why is it that, the wealthiest, there are several wealthy people, but the 4 wealthiest pastors are in Nigeria, where you have so much poverty. And it's just like, I'm like, guys, where's the fear of the Lord? Where is the fear of the Lord? I mean, come on now. We have so many people that are up on the pulpit, and it's like, don't you believe that he could inhale and you could fall down like that? Do you not care? Where is the fear? All this blood is on your hand.
Well, but that's false teachers. There's a Dr. Vodi Babu, if you never heard of him, real good guy. He moved to Nigeria because of that. He moved there because of so much false teaching that he left Houston and moved him, and I think he's got like 8 kids, and his wife, and he moved there because of that very thing. It was one of those things where, and he's an apologist, so it was one of those things where he said.
Oh, to combat it.
Yeah.
Oh,
to
okay.
no, he moved there to combat it.
Okay, gotcha, I thought.
To combat it. So if you wonder why those pastors are in Nigeria, one of the things that Nigeria is known for is some of the craziest teaching, Christian teaching, that you will ever find. There's a pastor there that literally hypnotizes people. That's his thing. You can go on YouTube and see he'll have girls out there eating grass.
And they'll come in droves.
Yes, and they come there and they do the whole.
I'm talking like 5,000 people sitting in the field listening to somebody on stage.
But the thing is, what they're doing is, and this is what we say, the wealthy have done. You look back at robber barons and people like that. I hate to use it, but I'm gonna have to say it. Real estate investors who invest in rental properties, especially in New York. What they like to do is they like to take poor people and basically steal their money from them. So what you have is pastors are in a position in impoverished places to do that very easily, because what they're promising them people is that they're going to come out of poverty. That's the promise. You're going to come out of poverty. Now, how you come out of poverty is by giving to me. They make themselves God, and that's what they're doing in Nigeria. Because those men are basically untouchable. Yes.
I was just gonna say, like, we were talking to Keenan about that because he learns different languages at his school, and I'm encouraging him so much to just keep learning the languages, because I was like, you can go to another country and you can get your education for free. And I said, and the concepts that we try to instill in you here, you will learn effortlessly over there, just naturally being there. The concepts of the Bible will come easy.
Yeah. So be cognizant of the fact that if God is going to speak to you, you really need to be in your word. Mm-hmm. You really do. Because if you're not, you're going to think God is speaking when he's not. Not just yourself, but something you hear. You mess around and believe all that mess Steve Harvey says, which is ridiculous. But I know people that I've heard was one person said at one point, I heard this on the radio, yeah, Steve Harvey, that's like my pastor. And I'm sitting there going, that's a shame. That's your pastor. I'm like, man, he's no, because he got his Christian, I call it his Christian stick. And it is so unbiblical and so far off the reservation. But what people don't know is that he preaches that. When he had his talk show, when he was doing the what is the game? Family Feud. In between sets, he tells the crowd, God has all of this stuff for you. He's got, and this is I've seen this. These are his words. He's got watches, rings, jewelry, cars, houses, vacations, whatever your heart desires, he has for you. It's up to you to tap into him to get it.
That's a genie in a bottle.
And somebody goes, ask my pastor. All right, so we'll stop there. David is here, and we'll let the choir get at it.
You just rubbed the link. You're welcome. Oh, yeah. How you doing? You're good. It was
Basically, you actually, I don't see it back there.
Well, he's still back on. Hey, turn this out.
Which one you want me to do?
Both.
Multitask, like you do at work.
I work from home.